Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Baldrige Foundation's Institute for Performance Excellence webinar, State-Based Baldrige Programs, the Gateway to Performance Excellence. Before we get started today, I want to take a moment and recognize all of our great sponsors, and a very special thanks to the members of the Mac Baldrige Society who serve as trustees for the Foundation's Institute for Performance Excellence. Here's today's agenda, and our guests include Brian Lasseter, Chair of the Alliance for Performance Excellence, Dr. Margot Hoffman, President and CEO of the Partnership for Excellence, and Dr. Mac McGuire, CEO of the Quality Texas Foundation. Following their presentations, we will have a Q&A period and then some closing remarks. And now I'm going to turn it over to Brian to get us started. Brian?
Hey, thanks, Al. Thanks to the Foundation and the Institute for hosting today's conversation. Thrilled to be a part of it. I am Brian Lasseter, Chair of the Alliance for Performance Excellence. And if you're not familiar with that organization, I'll give you a little bit of background and context of who we are in a second. I also should mention that I run the Baldrige-based program that serves Minnesota and North and South Dakota. It's called the Performance Excellence Network. That's my day job. So wearing a couple of hats today. So we'll go to the next slide. I'll give just a little bit of context for those of you that may not be fully familiar with what Baldrige is. I would imagine most are, but indulge me for 45, 60 seconds to introduce it for those that aren't. This is a picture of the framework. The Baldrige program is part of the Department of Commerce. Specifically, it sits in the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And it's been around since 1987. It was created under the Reagan administration and by act of Congress with the central purpose really of driving performance throughout the American economy. It was initially designed to help manufacturers, then service businesses, and now is being embraced by all types and sizes of organizations and healthcare and education and governmental agencies and by communities to improve outcomes. What you see here is the picture of the framework. There are 7 categories. It forms a management system. 6 of the categories are process categories that any leader in any type of organization is trying to pay attention to and improve. And then category 7 are results, the outcomes that that organization or community is trying to achieve. What's really fascinating in my mind about this framework is underneath these 7 categories are about 300 questions, each one representing a process or an outcome that you're trying to achieve. And the questions change every couple of years. It's evidence-based. They've been validated as really best practices that the higher performing organizations or communities are using to achieve that high performance. So it's really become an evidence-based system that any organization can gauge their own performance against, and used as a diagnostic assessment. And you'll hear some examples here in a moment from our case studies. It really helps inform leaders about where they focus their precious resources and priorities, ideally feeding their annual plans or strategic plans. So that's a little bit about Baldrige if you're not as familiar. We'll go to the next slide. Here's a little bit about the Alliance. So the Alliance is a nonprofit. It was founded in 2005, as indicated on the slide. And it's a network of the Baldrige-based programs and other supportive members throughout the United States that really serves to advance this whole concept of performance excellence throughout the United States economy. So the Alliance is one of 4 different parts of what we loosely call the Baldrige enterprise. That includes the Foundation, your host today, the Baldrige program itself, and ASQ. The Alliance is the 4th component. And we've been called the feeder system to the national program, the front door to the national program. Our work is really developmental in nature, of helping organizations and their leaders start or accelerate a journey to excellence. So you'll hear in a moment about some of the offerings and services that our Alliance members provide. Some of them are Baldrige-based. They're Baldrige assessments and a Baldrige recognition and award programs. But many of them are a little more indirectly Baldrige-based in providing forums and hosting conferences and roundtables and events that bring leaders together to share and learn what drives performance within their sectors and industries. Next slide. So this is the picture of the United States, and I wanted to indicate just our scale and footprint across the Alliance. So this in the next slide will demonstrate that. Today we have 33 members. 29 of them are Baldrige-based programs serving either a locality in one case, state programs, many regional programs, or in a couple of cases, national-based programs. You see ACA, NCAL as listed, serving the senior care, long-term care industry. and Communities of Excellence 2026, which is serving communities across America that are using these principles to improve performance. We have 4 other members that are listed on the slide. They are passionate about continuous improvement and performance excellence and supportive of the Alliance's mission. I mentioned earlier, I run as my day job one of the 29 Baldrige-based programs. It's called Performance Excellence Network. It serves Minnesota and North and South Dakota. But I'm here today in my role as chair of the Alliance. We'll hear in a few moments from 2 of the Alliance member programs that are serving 2 different regions within the country. Next slide indicates a little bit more about our scale. Last year, the Alliance member programs collectively served about 700 customers, 700 applications with 1,200 examiners. Both are down pretty sharply, actually, from 2019, 2020 numbers. As you can see, the trend on the chart was consistently up for the last decade or so. COVID obviously had an impact on the volume of our work, but it's kind of anecdotal, but I project collectively we'll see an increase in 2022. I think a lot of our Alliance member programs are expecting pent-up demand to kind of shake loose this year, as a lot of organizations are resuming their performance excellence journeys and doing some assessments after taking a year or 2 pause due to COVID. Some of the other bullets on the slide, I won't go through all of them, but you see the Alliance hosts 11 different conferences in different areas of the country. Also manages and hosts the Baldrige Fall Conference, which I'll say a little bit more about in a moment. The conferences combined are well over 3,000 combined participants. Many Alliance member programs also host workshops and webinars and roundtables and fellows programs or other cohort-based programs, some of which you'll hear about here in a moment. The Alliance itself is mainly volunteer. We have 2 very part-time paid staff, but no permanent W-2 staff. So we're all here as volunteers trying to advance the network of Baldrige-based programs. But many of our programs do have paid staff running the day-to-day operations. You see 37 FTE within the Alliance member programs, and collectively over 700 volunteers. And then if you add in the examiners, it'd be over 2,000 volunteers to really advance the collective missions of all of our Baldrige-based programs. So a decent scale, if you add up all the resources across all the Alliance member programs, trying to advance this concept of excellence across the nation. Next slide. I'll give you a second to look at this. It's kind of a busy slide. There's a lot on this page, but this is the Alliance's 2022 plan that was approved by the board just a couple of months ago. Probably more than you need to know, but I want to focus you on the left column in blue, which indicates our 4 strategic priorities for this year, 2022. The Alliance board has declared this the year of the member, the Alliance member, as we try to reevaluate and increase the value we bring to our own Alliance member programs. So we've got a lot of initiatives going. One of them is to update our own Baldrige organization profile, which has been not updated in several years. Actually, one of our speakers today, Mac, is leading that effort. We're also investing in more sophisticated marketing approaches to try to grow our pipeline of organizations involved in this journey. If we are the Baldrige front door, we're trying to grow the number of organizations exposed to, aware of, and committed to using Baldrige as its framework for excellence. And we have some other initiatives there too, reinvesting in our own processes, re-examining our role within that larger Baldrige enterprise. So a lot of activities for an all-volunteer network. Last couple of slides I want to introduce. I mentioned earlier that one of the programs, we'll go to the next slide, is to host the Baldrige Fall Conference. Not much on this slide other than a beautiful sailboat. But this occurs every October in the fall. The Alliance has hosted this for the last 7 years or so. And if you're not familiar, this is a 1-day version, 2 days if you participate in the pre-conference workshops and other activities, that features Baldrige and state level recipients, each sharing their insights and methods and best practices that are improving their own performance. So it's really good content. It's great networking. It's a shot in the arm, great energy for those that want to learn more about Baldrige, get started on their journey to excellence, or accelerate and continue their journey. This year is in San Diego. It's hosted by the California Baldrige-based program and Communities of Excellence 2026. It's October 19th and 20th. So put it on your calendar, hit that or bookmark that website. There's not much on it yet, but it's baldrigeconference.org. I know the conference committee is deep into planning. We hope to announce the program, the agenda, and open registration next month. So more to come there, but hope to see you in the fall. And then the last slide I have is just an invitation for you to check out your own Baldrige-based program. So there's one I said that's local. Many of them are state or regional based. If you're in the senior long-term care industry, check out the ACA-NCAL program serving that industry. Or if you're a leader or passionate about your community performance, check out the Communities of Excellence 2026 website. They all can be found at that website in red, baldrigealliance.org. And there's a lot of other resources. We're going to hear from two programs right now and some of the great work that they're both doing. So whether or not you're already embracing Baldrige or just want to learn more about it or learn more about performance excellence and continuous improvement in general, it's a great place to get started or to accelerate what you're doing. So let's introduce the first one, first of our two case studies and all the good work that Margot and her program, the Partnership for Excellence, are doing. Margot?
Thank you, Brian. As Brian said, I am over the Partnership for Excellence, which is the state or regional program that covers Ohio, Indiana, and West Virginia. I am also the vice chair of the Alliance, so I get engaged in the whole Alliance program as well as at the state level. So you might ask yourself, why start with the state or regional program? And you know, personally, I think it's the best place to start your Baldrige journey, but I might be a little bit biased. As Brian said, we are a feeder system to the national program. And so we design our processes at the state level so that we can help organizations get that start. A lot of times the criteria seems a little bit daunting, and we help you take those initial small steps to get started so that you can have a successful journey as you move toward performance excellence. Our programs mirror the national process, especially when you get to the top level awards, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So we're here to engage organizations, to help you get started on the journey through training and mentoring, and also with recognition. We're also a really economical way to start with Baldrige. As Brian shared with you, we don't have a lot of paid staff, but we have just an amazing army of volunteers that help us do the work that we do. So we're able to keep our assessments and our training at a very reasonable level for organizations that are starting off. So I'm going to walk us through some of the things that you'll see in most state programs so you can see how we can assist you on your journey to performance excellence. Next slide, please. One of the main things that our programs do is provide training to organizations. And almost every state program has some level of training. Some do it more than others. You're going to hear from Mac, who does an extraordinary amount of training in all different areas. Most of the programs do provide examiner training. So getting examiners prepared to be able to do assessments. A lot of organizations use examiner training as development of their folks. It's a great way to get a critical mass within your organization that understand the criteria and how organizations are assessed when you have examiners trained. A lot of programs also offer Baldrige criteria training, just understanding the criteria and sharing best practices of responses to the criteria. And these can be done in workshops or they can be done in web series. Most of the programs also provide some regular type of webinars. I know at the Partnership for Excellence, we partner with 6 other programs within the Alliance, and we offer a monthly training for everyone. The other thing that we offer is oftentimes we offer leadership training, and leadership could be in the areas of around the criteria, or it could be developing future leaders with people. And lastly, I just want to share that we are able to provide training both virtually, in person, and through our learning management system. Okay, I'd now like to talk about assessments. I think we lost our feed here. But for the assessments, we offer various tier level assessments through the state programs. So when programs start, oftentimes it's their organizational profile that needs help. and that lays the foundation for their application. So we help organizations in developing that organizational profile and giving them feedback on how to improve it. We also have tiered levels of the application where you could respond to a 20 or 25 page application in response to the Baldrige Excellence Builder, and get feedback on that from examiners. And lastly, we can provide full 50-page applications that goes through the full Baldrige process. So for a 50-page application, the state programs are working with a standard for the assessment process and also a judging standard. So we are consistent in how we assess organizations to a full 50-page application addressing the entire Baldrige criteria. Do we have any slides yet? Okay, the outcome of the assessment process is a feedback report that organizations receive that provides you with strengths and opportunities for improvement, scoring, and key themes, so that you can take that feedback back to your organization and prioritize the opportunities for improvement, and develop action plans on how you're going to make improvements there. Next slide, please. Another thing that takes place at the state level program is recognition programs. And the nice thing about working with your state program is they are walking alongside of you throughout your Baldrige journey. So they are following you on that path to performance excellence, which gives great opportunities to be recognized along the way. Most state programs offer tier level recognition. So as you complete your organizational profile, as you complete a abbreviated profile, you can be recognized at your state level. Also, we recognize top tier award recipients, and that is a standard that all of the that all of the state programs adhere to a standard for those top level awards. So we can recognize our state level awards. Oftentimes there may be the Governor's Award for Excellence or some other title, but those award recipients then go on and are able to apply at the national level if they're recognized there. Also, a lot of programs offer individual recognition. Maybe it's the Volunteer of the Year Award or some type of leadership. It's a great time to recognize your examiners. So there's a lot of recognition that takes place at the state level that you can be recognized for as you take that path to performance excellence. Next slide, please. As Brian shared, a lot of our state programs have conferences. There's about 35% of the state programs that are doing an annual conference. And these are great ways to see best practices shared. There's a lot of learning that takes place. Normally the National Baldrige recipients, as well as the state Baldrige recipients, participate in those conferences to present in breakout sessions and plenary sessions. There's just a tremendous amount of networking that takes place during these conferences. And oftentimes the award ceremonies are part of this. So this might be where the recognition takes place. And they're just a lot of fun. We become communities within the bigger Baldrige community, and we get to know each other, and we develop peer groups of folks that we can share best practices with and we can network with. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about communities of excellence. Brian mentioned that they are a national level organization that is part of the Alliance. And so they're a peer to the state programs. And I wanted to just share a little bit about them because they are one of the newer members of the Alliance, and they're doing just really important work. But if you look at that foundation statement at the right, when the Communities of Excellence was first established, It was looking at how can we sustain America's vitality and promote opportunities and create a more equitable society. And to do that, we must improve the performance of the communities and the people who lead and live in them. And so the Baldrige criteria was adapted to communities, and there's now a framework for communities of excellence that communities can use to improve the quality of life within their communities. There's a learning collaborative that communities who are participating in the program can participate in. So they're monthly learning opportunities for communities to learn more about the framework and understand what it's asking and share best practices among communities. They can also submit an application just like organizations do when they're submitting an application to the Baldrige criteria. Communities can submit an application to that is in response to the Communities of Excellence framework and have examiners provide them with feedback on it. And lastly, they also have a recognition program to recognize those organizations that did go through the assessment process and provide them with recognition. The next slide, please. So we recommend that you get involved with your state or regional program. There's lots of great opportunities to do so. You can become an applicant, as I shared, with our tiered approach. You can start off just working on your organizational profile, which is a great first step for organizations to get started. But if you've already done an organizational profile and want some feedback on your application to the full Baldrige criteria, the state programs can help you with an assessment. You can become an examiner. As I shared, this is just a great opportunity for development and to really learn the Baldrige criteria. You can get training. Mac's going to talk about a lot of different types of training that he's offering in his state program. Most of the state programs have great opportunities for training, as well as attending a conference. One thing I want to add here is within the Alliance, as Brian shared, that we're all networked together and we share among our programs. Oftentimes, if one program doesn't have a service that another program has, that program will step in and help them out. So it could be with training or assessments. So just, if you work through your state program, they will guide you on a way to get the services that you need. And lastly, there's great opportunities to volunteer within your state program. As I shared, the programs do most of their work through volunteers. I know within the Partnership for Excellence, we have almost 200 volunteers that help us with our assessments, with our conference, with our training. So there are great opportunities for you to get engaged. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Mac, who's going to share some of the success stories in his program.
Okay, thank you, Margot. Thank you, Brian and Margot. What I would like to do is maybe take a little different approach and talk about three particular entities that we've worked with. And at the Alamo College District, which is a community college, Sugar Land, obviously, Memorial Hermann Healthcare, and then Mid-America Transplant. And out beside of that, you see the time that they won the Baldrige Award. And I'd like to direct your attention to James Collins and the quote that he had over here, and I'll let you read that. Now, the key words there in what Collins is talking about is discipline. And that is one of the things that all organizations who are going to apply for the Baldrige Award need to understand, that this is a disciplined approach. It is not a quick approach. Next slide, please. So as we take a look at the organizations and what they have accomplished, I wanted to focus in on a couple of things. Alamo Colleges in San Antonio, Texas, is responsible for community colleges, 5 colleges, and they have increased their graduation rate 150%. Many of you know that our last line of defense on educating our young may in fact be the community colleges. So you can see the scholarships, the degrees, and you can see one thing that I think is really important. They increased their overall educational student satisfaction to 88.4%, which is outstanding. Next slide, please. At Memorial Harmon Sugarland, we worked with them for a number of years, and they sent a number of examiners, and Margot talked about this, but you really need to get your people trained as examiners. It's not only about understanding Baldrige, it is about understanding the best business principles. And so some of the keys for Sugarland was the workforce retention and likely to recommend. And the bottom line is the earnings that they had from Standard & Poor's and exceeded the benchmarks. Next slide, please. And then we have Mid-America Transplant, which is an organ transplant organization. And the key here for them was the cost per donor decrease, $20,000 if they had to do it in a hospital. They built their own facility, and so they were able to reduce that cost. Top workplace in St. Louis, and customer complaints near zero, which we would all like to have. Next slide, please. So let me talk about other success. Texas Nameplates out of Lancaster, Texas, a small for-profit. I was able to work with a young man on his PhD, and we found out that they had made over $40 million in the last 20 years. And the CEO said it was due to the adoption of the Baldrige criteria. Radiation Detection Company worked 4 years with Baldrige. They were making about $130,000, $150,000 profit. The next year, after 4 years, they were making over $3 million, and they eventually sold the company for $30 million. The city of El Paso, 6,600 employees, two-time recipient of our award level, went to Baldrige last year, didn't make it, but they have saved over $80 million. Tommy Gonzalez is our board chair, the city manager there, and he says, you know, I don't care if I ever win, because I'm saving money for the taxpayers and providing better services for the residents and the visitors to the El Paso area. He's trained over 100 people as internal coaches, examiners, and over 500 people in the leadership program, which has led to a number of courageous conversations, which is something I'll talk about in a moment, that we must have if we're going to do Baldrige. But let me say that in the 8 years I've been the CEO, I have seen and documented a 10 to 20% improvement across the board in the three key areas that Baldrige really talks to, and that is customer service satisfaction, workforce satisfaction, engagement, and financial management. Next slide, please. So other training, as Margot talked about, and Brian does too, we have different levels of recognition so that you're able to walk into the shallow end of the pool and walk down to the deep end. And you don't have to do the 50 pages right off the bat. We also have pre-examiner seminars for those people that are first-time examiners. And now we have the new organizational leadership examiner training, which goes far past Baldrige. We call it Baldrige Plus. And you get a continuous improvement certification from the University of Texas, El Paso, a tier 1 university, once you complete the requirements there. But all the state programs offered, as Margot talked about, several tailored programs and category training. And then our state offers the latest information, because we bring in all the information. I used to teach MBA for 26 years after I left the Army. And I can tell you that we bring in the latest research about leadership, about strategic planning, and things like that, and with the backdrop of the Baldrige criteria. Next, please. The final topics, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit here about being an examiner. Margot alluded to it somewhat, but I want to make sure that you understand that our state programs, as Brian alluded to, become a national training ground for examiners that go to the national program. But more important than that, I think, is the fact that you get an employee back that you should be able to ask specific questions about the criteria and things of that nature. Most of in Baldrige state programs, I think some of the programs, certainly we use the Baldrige criteria for our operations, and Quality Texas Foundation has completed a Baldrige application annually. We do that through our board, and it's led to explosive growth, over $800,000 profit in the last 7 years. We only have 2 employees. So state programs are focused, some are in regions, as Margot alluded to. Our program is Texas, Puerto Rico, Missouri, Kansas, Louisiana, and 1 entity from Oklahoma. But again, we focus on 3 components: And the Baldrige program is based upon that. I'm not saying this again, other than to make sure you hear it again about the customer satisfaction, the workforce engagement, and financial management. Next slide, please. And that concludes my portion of the presentation.
Thanks again, Brian, Margot, and Mac, for some very interesting upfront information that will lead us into our discussion here. We have just got a plethora of questions that have popped up. And Brian, I think the first one's going to go to you. And it's, we appreciate knowing that the Alliance member programs can help their organization start a Baldrige journey to excellence. But how would you recommend they get started? Become examiners, ? Attend training or conferences, ? Or jump in and do an assessment? Help them think through the pathway. Help us think through the pathway.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Al, and whoever submitted it. I think Margot had some of the answer, Mac had some of the answer. My short answer is just get started. I think there's a lot of ways to begin the learning process. Become an examiner is one of them. You learn so much about the power of this framework by learning in a classroom what it is and how to do an evaluation, but then jumping on a team and looking at an organization other than your own. You'll see some good best practices, some strengths that even though you're sworn to secrecy of who you're evaluating, you can't help but take those ideas back into your home organization. So become an examiner, go to a conference or go to some training to learn more about this framework. Benchmark, reach out to other organizations that are on the journey already and explore what value it provided to them and how they got started. Or maybe start with an organization profile. I think Margot mentioned that it's the questions that sit in front of the process questions of the framework. They're really powerful consensus building questions for a team, ideally a leadership team, to reflect on, form consensus on, and get aligned on. So maybe start an evaluation, either a self-evaluation or use a consultant or use your state or regional program to do an evaluation against the org profile. So it really depends on where you want to start, but I would just suggest getting started. Pick one of these strategies or multiple ones and learn more about the framework and then dive in. I think by using the framework and starting to self-assess and then eventually use a third party to assess, you're going to learn more about the Baldrige framework itself and more about your organization so that you take those steps forward.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Margot, next question goes to you. A lot of organizations engaged in my state program are in the healthcare sector, but my organization is in the business sector. Is there much value in engaging with the state program in networking and best practice sharing within organizations from different sectors?
Thank you, Al. Great question. I've actually seen some of the best learning occur across industry sectors. So I'd have to say yes to the response. And just a couple of examples that I could share. We recently had a middle manager at a barge company that was going through our leadership development program. And we did a best practice visit to a Baldrige recipient in the healthcare sector. And he just loved their strategic planning process. And so he went back to his organization and he convinced the CEO of the company and their leadership team to redesign their entire strategic planning process based on what he learned from a healthcare system. So this is an organization that has barges out in the Gulf of Mexico transporting petroleum that learned something from a healthcare system. And then another interesting example is I was seeing a presentation from a healthcare system that is in an area that it's very hard to recruit nurses. And so they were recruiting some pretty entry-level nurses, but they wanted to put them through training. And they were looking for some unique approaches to training. And they actually benchmarked a welding institute on how they put their welders through an apprenticeship program and adopted some of the best practices from that training. So I absolutely, with a resounding yes, say that there is a value in engaging with other organizations that are outside of your industry.
Thanks, Margot. Mac, in your 31 years working with the Baldrige criteria in a variety of programs, what makes organizations reticent to begin?
Okay, thank you. There are three things. I normally go in threes about everything that I do. First one is the journey. I mean, Baldrige is a journey. It is not a destination. You are never finished. A lot of the organizations I work with keep asking me, they said, so when we win, we're finished. I said, no, because as Brian talked about, every 2 years, the criteria is updated and changed based upon new events that take place. So the journey is one of the things that scares some people away. The second thing is patience. It takes patience to work through this criteria. It takes patience to go through the training. I had a call from a CEO the other day that said, this year, we're going to work on Baldrige. I said, well, then don't do it. He said, well, I want to win the Baldrige Award next year because I'm retiring. I said, well, don't do it. This is not for you. Dell Computer called me the other day and said, we want to do Baldrige. What can we do in 90 days? Not much. I mean, we can start to work on things, but not much, because Baldrige is not a quick fix. It's not a flavor of the month. A lot of my educators will call me and say, this month we want to do Baldrige. That's utterly ridiculous. So we got to think about the patience that it takes. The last thing, which may be even the most important, is this fear of self-examination. When I talk to leaders, I had a school superintendent at my house the other day, and he said, I think I want to do Baldrige. And I said, okay, here's what happens. And you'll have a balanced scorecard, or you'll have something like this, and you'll present this to the board and you will track your progress. And he said, well, I don't want to do that. I said, why? He said, because right now they don't know what I'm doing. And if I do Baldrige, they're going to know that maybe I'm not the leader they need. So he didn't do it. So this self-examination scares a lot of people off. So if you're scared of being a leader, and I don't mean to insult your intelligence, but I do mean the gravity of the situation requires that you must take a look at yourself and then change. And nobody likes change except a wet baby and a panhandler. But when you do Baldrige, you're going to have to change. The process is going to have to change, and it is going to make this self-reflection make sure that your organization is moving forward on the right path.
Thanks, Mac. Brian, we're going to come back to you. It seems like the Baldrige framework really does work, and I appreciate hearing from the Alliance members all the offerings available to help get them started. But we feel overswamped with staffing shortages, continued supply chain issues, and other challenges. How would you recommend we carve out the time to get started?
Yeah. Who's not busy these days? And it seems like the challenges just keep accelerating, right? I think there's never a good time to start. There's always you always can defend and find bad reasons to not start, but it does take a little bit of investment to get going. I mentioned earlier that you probably should learn a little bit about the Baldrige framework, hear from others that are on the journey to excellence, and see what worked for them and how to get going and so forth. But I think my overarching answer here would be to realize that Baldrige is not just another project or another initiative on your plate, but it's the way that you manage and improve the organization. And I'll tell a real quick story. There's a pretty large, sophisticated, high-performing healthcare system in my state, Minnesota, and I'll leave them nameless, but you can probably figure it out. And they went through, they've been on the journey for excellence about 10 years. And the second time they went through our assessment process in Minnesota at the PIN program, our final step is what we call an improvement planning session, where we you go through an independent review and a consensus review and a site visit, and then out pops the feedback report that Margot alluded to earlier, I think. And in the improvement planning session, it's a couple of hours, 2 to 3 hour working session with senior leaders to present the findings, help the organization's leaders understand what the team found, and help them begin to prioritize where they focus their energy moving forward. And this outbrief was to the top 70, 80 leaders within this healthcare system. And one of them raised their hand and said, I want to have a discussion about how we continue to use Baldrige here at the system. And I thought, oh my, this is going to get us into some really dicey waters. But when you peeled back his question, he said that he believed that the leadership of this health system was viewing it as a project, as something separate that just had to be done. And then they'd go back to their day-to-day work. Thank you very much. And he believed that it should be the way that they manage that system. And from then forward, they completely changed how they viewed Baldrige. And they started to integrate the Baldrige categories and their OFIs into weekly management staff meeting agendas. And they started realigning their leadership system to tackle different things that they were focused on that were truly important to them. So they begin to integrate the concepts of Baldrige and their experience of an assessment into how they manage the business. And from there, they took off. I think that's my central point here, is that we're all very busy. I would start slow, and Margot outlined some of the tiered steps you could use to get going, but then eventually use it as what's intended to use, the way that you manage your organization, your enterprise. And over time, just a postscript, over time, you'll find that your gains far outweigh the investment that you've made. You're going to save money, you're going to save time, you're going to become more efficient, and you'll wonder what you spent all that time on originally, because you're actually a much better managed, much more efficient and aligned organization.
Thank you, Brian. Margot, we're back to you. Our board has given our organization the goal of receiving the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. Is it necessary for our organization to apply at the state level and receive the top level state award first, or can we just go directly to the national program and submit an application?
Thanks, Al. I think Mac talked a little bit about this. If that's your goal, is to just get the award, you're probably not in it for the right reason. And so, just to answer that question, a few years back, the national program made a decision that we would become the feeder system for applicants. So they were asking applicants to go through their state or regional or industry sector program before they and reach that highest level award before they apply nationally. Now, there are exceptions. So organizations are able to apply directly to national because of those exceptions. But, I just highly recommend that you go through one of the programs, because you can take those baby steps through the program. As Max said, you can start in the shallow end and we can help get you to the deep end. We have those opportunities to get recognition along the way, which is a great morale booster for your folks. And we can also help those folks become good examiners and trained in the criteria. So we recommend that you start with us, but like I said, there are exceptions that you can go to the national level, and there are organizations that have used those exceptions. But if you take those exceptions and you don't become eligible, you have to come back to the program anyways. So we're just a great stepping stone to help you on your Baldrige journey and walk that path with you. Thanks.
I'm going to throw in my 2 cents here, having been a state program director myself. Another couple reasons why you want to start with the state program. First of all, they follow the same process using the same criteria for the most part. And they do it in such a way that in the national program, they truly take in applications, and their job are to evaluate organizations. State programs take in applications and help mentor, coach, teach, train, and guide organizations to become better and be better prepared for the national level. So it's a much different approach. And not only that, it's far more economical. The price tag on a national application is somewhat significantly higher than any of our state programs. And so you actually save money getting started in Baldrige with more of that mentorship and guiding sort of atmosphere. And state programs almost across the board leverage and utilize national examiners from their own state integrated into their state program to help do some of the teaching, training, coaching, mentoring, and assessments. So you get people with national level experience at the state level as well. So for a lot of reasons, you really do want to start with state programs. And I've seen that time and time again in my own experience. So the next question, I'm going to throw to Mac here. Mac, what is the major impact on the workforce of an organization that is adopting Baldrige?
Okay, thank you very much. There are 3 things, because my whole life is based on 3. First is learning about holistic processes. Most of us are working in silos. We know we're working in silos. We don't know how to get out of the silos. And what Baldrige is going to help you do is it's going to take a look at your key work processes in category 6 and your key support processes. And when you look at those, the top 3, then you're able to take a look and see, wait a minute, when we do this, this impacts us on the financial side. When we do this, our workforce is aggravated. When we do this, our customers are disappointed. So It's a way to look at holistic processes and make sure that works for everyone. And that is going to lead to workforce satisfaction and more engagement. The second point is it's mandatory that you have courageous conversations. I mean, I owe my boss to tell my boss if I think my boss is going the wrong way, violating one of our values, not complying with the vision, mission, or whatever else it might be, or assigning a lot of extra work to my people that we don't need to do and things like that, rather than going around and whining in the break room. It requires courageous conversations to be able to go and tell people about that. Short story. When I was working for General James, because I served in the Army 30 years, one of the things he had me do is he had me bring in a brown chair and 3 blue chairs in his office. And when we would go to the meeting, he would explain a problem to us and he would say this. He would say, whoever sits in the brown chair has to disagree with every word out of my mouth. You need people that disagree with you. You must, in these courageous conversations, your yes must be your yes, and your no must be your no. And so you've got to stand firm with these courageous conversations. Now, one time I walked in the room and I jumped in the blue chair because I was agreeing with him all the way on something that he wanted to do. He made me go to the brown chair and I had to do something that I had not intended on doing in the meeting. I had to think. So courageous conversations mean that I owe you as my boss the truth about how I'm feeling. You're still the boss. I'm going to do what you say, but I owe you that. And you owe me courageous conversations coming from the other way. The last thing is that when you adopt Baldrige and you implement it, you cannot do that well. You cannot do that well without getting information from the front line. And the front line, being a battalion commander twice, has taught me this. The front line, the people that are out there doing the job are making it work. They may not be following your policies. They may not be following your procedures, but they know one thing, they know how to make it work. And so you've got to go down there and ask them. One of the things that I used to ask, and I know this sounds ridiculous when I say it, but I would go down there and say, what are we doing stupid? What are we doing that does not make sense? Now, I would like for them to say nothing because you're here, but they always had an overflow of things. And I was amazed at how many things I had caused at 6 levels above where they work. So workforce engagement satisfaction goes up exponentially. Why? Because we're engaging our employees in solving the problems, and they need to solve their problems at their level. If you have to go down 4 or 5 levels to solve a problem, you're not doing your job because you're paying them to do that part. So holistic processes, courageous conversations, improves workforce engagement when we talk to them. Now, some people tell me, they say, well, you know, that's the millennials. You're talking about the millennials. No, based on research, Harvard Business School, MIT Sloan, I'm talking about every employee wants the boss to talk to them and listen to what they say. Listening is the highest form of human respect. So we're going to improve that workforce engagement because we will not be successful with Baldrige if we do not talk to the front line.
Thanks, Mac. Brian, we're circling back to you. Where is the Alliance heading, and where do you see Baldrige in a few years?
First of all, what color chair are you sitting in right now, Mac? I want to ask. I'm kidding. I've known Mac a long time. I think you're always sitting in a brown chair, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
No, good question, Al. Short answer is growth. I think that chart I shared earlier, you saw a slow but steady increase in the number of applicants, number of organizations that we were serving across the country. But we've taken a year or two dip. I think COVID's had an impact on our work. We've got to turn that back on the other way. And, you know, I've heard many times, and I think my colleagues here would agree, I've heard that the Baldrige is the best kept secret for the nation. I've heard it in my state. I've heard it across the country. We need to change that and educate people on what it is and what it isn't. I think some leaders have a dated perspective of what the Baldrige program is all about and what the Baldrige framework is all about. Maybe they heard about it in 1987, 1988 when it first came into be, and really haven't picked up the book since. As I mentioned, the framework and the questions change every couple of years, so it's a dynamic, ever-evolving set of best practices. Really, it's the yardstick that defines excellence for the nation. So understanding that and understanding that there are multiple ways to get involved and multiple pathways you can choose, just choosing one and beginning to experience the value of and the power of this framework is really what it's all about. I oftentimes tell senior leaders in my day job when I'm trying to convince them that there's value in adopting this framework, that when you look at the framework and start peeling it back, any organization has leaders, any organization has workers, any organization has customers. You may call them students or patients or something else. And so you start understanding the nature of this framework and what it represents. It is the system that any leader in any organization is trying to manage. It just helps you make it more visible and help you manage it a little more systematically, a little more intentionally. So I think the answer is growth. As you saw from the Alliance plan on a page, we have a lot of intentional focus this year on marketing and generating awareness and trying to get the word out about what Baldrige is across the Alliance and across all of our member programs. I think you'll see that curve turn and hopefully accelerate. Our goal this year and beyond is to get more organizations, more communities involved and feel the power of this framework so that we have better outcomes across all of our enterprises and all of our communities in the nation.
Brian, real quick one for you, because there's like 5 questions I'm going to wordsmith into one. And I know that for those out you in the audience there, Brian has a great deal of experience working with the American Healthcare Association, ACA. Brian, does the process and the framework follow the ACA process and framework procedures?
Yeah, if I understand the question correctly, they're very, very similar. In fact, when Margot described the tiered award structure, there are some variances across the Alliance member programs, the state and regionals and ACA, but they're, I think, 80-90% similar. And so the ACA process, which I am pretty familiar, has a bronze, silver, and gold pathway. That's basically organization profile, a little bit of the framework, and all of the framework, to loosely paraphrase it. It's a very similar stair-step process that many senior care organizations are using to get better. I don't know the volume off the top of my head, and I probably shouldn't spew out numbers, but there are hundreds of long-term care, senior care organizations across the nation using the ACA NCAL framework to improve with great effectiveness. So yeah, if you're in that industry and are not familiar with it, check out the ACA website and the Quality Award Program, and there's a lot more information on that site.
Thank you, Brian. Margot, next question's for you. I lead my organization's performance improvement initiatives, and I see the value in beginning a Baldrige journey with my state program. However, I don't have complete buy-in from the rest of the organization's leadership team. Should I go ahead and start working with my state program, or should I wait until I have the support of the entire leadership team?
Well, if you look at the Baldrige criteria, you can see that for category 7 results is the most points that you can get in scoring. But the next one is the leadership, category 1. And so that just shows you the importance of leadership in guiding your organization and being on board. And I think ultimately you want to have your leadership supporting your initiatives. But having said that, I think Brian said it a little bit ago, just get started. And if that's just with a few folks that are committed and believe in the Baldrige criteria, the best way to get your leadership is to show them results. And the best way to get results is to apply the criteria. And so I recommend that you just get started and hit some home runs and get some great outcomes from your initiatives as a result of using the criteria. And then, hopefully that'll open the eyes to your leadership. We had a president of a rural hospital that's part of a greater health system, and he started on the journey. He himself was an examiner with us. His organization, his hospital made it up to our top level award. But it wasn't that they just won the award. Their results started going through the roof as a result of them using the criteria. And pretty soon the CEO of that large health system was saying, what's going on over there? Why are they doing so much better in this small rural hospital than some of our bigger metro hospitals? And it was because of Baldrige. And now they've had 4 more of their hospitals go through the process because they've seen what it can do for, even a small hospital within a larger health system.
We didn't hear
Okay,
the-
this one's for Brian. Yeah, did I understand that the site visits offer collaborative opportunities to review feedback and progress? This is a value add over and above the feedback report.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I didn't hear that the first time, Al. Yeah, some programs do. My program that serves Minnesota and the North and South Dakota does. I know some programs do offer that step. Some are part of the normal evaluation process. Some are optional steps towards the end of the evaluation process. I would just contact your local program and see what the steps are and if they offer that dialogue at the end. I don't know if Mac or Margot want to chime in whether or not your programs, we call it an improvement planning session. I know some have very informal dialogues with senior leaders to help them make sense of the feedback.
We offer it, after we provide a feedback report, if people want to go over any type of discussion or collaboration. It's not always taken up. I think a lot of our programs, because they're engaged with training and other things, they kind of do that assessment themselves. But when we have done some collaborative work, it's really powerful. It really helps the organization to prioritize. They're getting this feedback with lots of opportunities for improvement. What's the best way to prioritize where their work is and where their initial action plans are going to take place. So we do offer it, but it's not always taken up.
Yeah, we offer it too. And almost without exception, our people ask for it. And I feel like Daniel going into the Lions Den when they have their whole group there in an auditorium, and they're, the senior leader is telling me, said, all your examiners must be really dumb because we didn't win. And then we go through the application, and I watch his or her face change drastically as we go through the application, and we start talking about the strengths and the OFIs, and they realize they're not doing what they thought they were doing, or they thought it was deployed and it's not deployed, which happens most often. They think because they said it that it went all the way to the front line immediately that day, and everybody is actually doing it. And that is definitely not the case. It takes time to get down to the front line, but all of ours take it. And we have made some long-lasting friends and sponsorships and some other things with that. And sometimes they come to us 2 or 3 times before they get ready to go to Baldrige, because we also help them get ready to go to Baldrige too, to make sure that our feedback report is an instrumental part of their achieving the National Baldrige Award.
Okay, one last question real quick. We don't have a lot of time left, but this came in a variety of different ways, and we have touched on it somewhat. But for all 3 of you, as the manager, so this is from the perspective of a manager, as a manager within a large organization, I understand the value and benefits of the framework, but are there any recommendations from the 3 of you on how to build C-suite relationships and get buy-in?
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. I think the most effective is to learn from other C-suite leaders. And I think Mac and Margot both made reference to that, either through conferences or one-on-one, have a lunch with another CEO or C-suite person that is on the journey and learn what they did, what worked, what didn't, what value they've seen. The 3 of us, and you, Al, too, and all the leaders in the Baldrige enterprise can talk until we're blue in the face about the value of this framework. And you kind of can tell we're passionate about it because we know it works. But having a leader talk to a leader about what he or she did and what value their organization saw is really what I think sells the concept to other leaders to get them involved. Mac, Margot?
Yeah, I agree, Brian. And I think the other thing is, when, I mentioned that we've had presidents of hospitals participate as examiners. And so when if they're part of a greater parent organization and that senior leadership sees that commitment, I think that that creates some buy-in by the senior leaders as well. And I think there's nothing like showing results, like if you are showing that by using the criteria, you were able to improve performance and show that to your leaderships, that gets that buy-in. But I have had some of the some CEOs that sit on our board that are always looking for opportunities to network with other CEOs that are on the journey. And that might be an opportunity as well, because all of our state programs have boards, and they're usually senior leaders that are on those boards. So those are great ways to get them engaged because we know their time is valuable and they might not have the time to be an examiner or to get engaged with the criteria as much as they could, but they could, maybe attend quarterly board meetings and engage with other people at their level they're also on the journey.
Yeah, I want to echo those same comments about our board of directors. We have 31 people on our board of directors. We have 10 national Baldrige winners. We have 1 3-time winner, 2 2-time winners. Rest of them have won single times. We have 17 state winners. And so when I find a CEO who's a little reticent about attacking this, I will normally have them contact one of our board members. And one of the, in wrapping up, a couple of things I'd like to say is Baldrige is nothing more and nothing less than an operating system. You would not go to Best Buy and buy a computer without having PowerPoint, Word, and all the stuff on it. Baldrige is an operating system. And if you've got about 12 or 18 months in a concerted effort to work on Baldrige and you're doing more work, you're not doing it right, because the work will begin to be eliminated and you'll do less work. And one of the last things I want to sum it up by saying, Harvard Business School did a massive study of the Fortune 100 companies about measures, and they found out that 70% of the things they measured is worthless. So we're measuring a bunch of stuff. The senior leader, if you're on this call and you're a leader, senior leader, one of the things that you need to ask when you get a presentation and they start the death by PowerPoint, one of the things you need to ask when you see a slide come by is, how does that improve our customer service, workforce engagement, or financial management? And I promise you, you will begin to get down to the priorities that are actually those that your organization needs to work with.
Brian, Margot, Mac, thank you for such dynamic presentations today. I thoroughly enjoyed listening to you myself. Thanks again to everybody today for listening in. Once again, I want to thank all of our sponsors, especially members of the Mac Baldrige Society, the trustees for the Institute for Performance Excellence. It is their generous support that makes these presentations like today's possible. To all the educators out there, and there are a number of them, a number of people from Texas too, just want you to know, all those, especially in the Uvalde area, you're in our thoughts and prayers. Please be safe out there and have a great day, everyone. Thank you.